Prof, good morning to you and thank you very much for joining us here on the Morning Star.
Yes, good morning and good morning to your cherished listeners.
Great. Prof, good to have you. We are having this conversation on the back of the complaints that are coming up in relation to the domestic debt exchange program, as well as the foreign debts, foreign bonds as well, the Euro bonds. Over the weekend, a very prominent Ghanaian who has worked all his life and has invested in all that, told his story of how he invested in cocoa bills. He opted not to be part of the debt exchange program. The condition was that, okay, we're going to give you a capital, but it will be discounted. The money hits the account and then immediately the money is debited until date. The person doesn't have it. That is for the domestic front. And then for the foreign front, we've heard Ghanaian American comedian Michael Blankson complain bitterly about investing $1 million. Now they are being given the option of taking a 37% cut or take 1.9% interest with 15 years maturity. Now, Prof, how dire is the situation? It looks as though many of us did not appreciate how, serious of an impact this was having on many people.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, certainly. Others have lived through this. It's been a long journey, essentially from 2022. Let me put it that way. From the third quarter of 2021, the data was quite clear that Ghana was heading dangerously. Government delay in reaching out to the IMF actually compounded the situation. If they had proactively reached out to the IMF, probably in the third quarter or last quarter of 2021, clearly the debt exchange or the debt restructuring would have been avoided, because that was also a similar situation Kenya found itself, but Kenya reached out proactively and Kenya escaped the haircut. Fast forward, December, when the domestic debt exchange, the initial memorandum of understanding was announced, and the back and forth and all of that, eventually we can see that we completed the domestic debt exchange. The fiscal relief to government, or the fiscal savings to government, worked up to around 61 billion cedis. That's from the domestic funds. Okay, so whilst it represents fiscal savings to the government, that is cost to bondholders. That's cost to people who have worked so hard over the years and lent money to Ghana government. They did not commit any error. They did not commit any sin. I mean, just by lending to Ghana government, that was the mistake they made, probably, and all of that. So, whilst government, Minister of Finance, and including governors of Bank of Ghana, were happy about the relief, and others even had cocktail over the relative stability that we have seen. That was pain. That was hurt, distress to pensioners, to individual bondholders, to body corporates. I mean, others had a cushion to absorb that. Others didn't have the financial position to be able to absorb that. But that was what we went through. Now, when it comes to the cocoa bill, the initial proposition was that this was supposed to go to financial institutions. But some financial institutions more or less outsource this risk to individual investors. And therefore, the exposure was more or less transferred to some individual investors. And therefore, in the scheme of things, while the central bank probably looked at it that they were dealing with banks or body corporates, when you lift the veil, you get to see individuals who are also affected. That's another level. The other bit to take into consideration is that traditionally, bills are more for liquidity management. Typically, they will mature in 6 months or maximum a year. But here you have a case for a government that has mismanaged its affairs and was in a liquidity trap. And therefore, in the bid to create fiscal space to grant itself relief, what should have matured, what should have been considered a short-term instrument, now were structured into medium to long-term. So it means that it constrains the liquidity position of the individual investors and also body corporates. For body corporates, usually it's just like in a very turbulent times, big planes may fly, the smaller ones will have to wait. So some of these body corporate financial institutions, especially the international ones and the regional banks, they had the wings to fly. They had the wings to absorb many of this. But for individuals, I mean, some of them just had all that to live on was how much they had invested in Ghana government bills. Some had taken their pensions, the lump sum, and invested it in there. And if you look at the way the bonds have been restructured, some of the pensioners, it doesn't matter their age, they must be prepared to live up to 2037, 2038, if they didn't want to live that long. That's what government wants them to do. They must prepare, exercise, whatever, to live long to receive their investment. That's quite hard to take, right? Then so that's from the domestic end. So the fiscal savings that government boasted about in 2023 budget, you can check. And also the 2024 from the domestic debt restructuring that created fiscal space of about 61 billion cedis. That's cost. Once it's a relief to government, that's cost. That's sacrifice from creditors or lenders to Ghana government from the domestic end. Of course, from the domestic instrument, there was approximately $808 million of that component that were dollar denominated. So in the classifications, the IMF included that dollar denominated component of the domestic debt as part of our external debt, and therefore the external debt as at the end of 2022, December 2022, worked up to about $30.5 billion. Now, out of these 30.5, I'm now moving to the external debt. Is that okay?
Yes.
Out of these $30.5 billion, the multilateral institutions, including the African Development Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the European Central Bank, and all of them, our exposure to these multilateral institutions worked up to about $8.8 billion. Now, the IMF or these multilateral institutions came together and said that, look, restructure everybody else's debts. As for ours, exclude it. It's untouchable, right? So that is about $8.8 billion that was excluded from the universe of eligible bonds to be restructured in terms of the external debt restructuring. Out of this, we had about 5.1 at that time of the external bilateral owed to bilateral countries, which had to be restructured under the Paris Club. Okay, but we also had non-Paris Club members like China, India, and the others who had lent to Ghana government. So we had to work through what they call the G20 Common Framework, right, which is a successor to the debt service suspension initiative that was announced in 2020 in the run-up as a result of the effects of COVID-19, because there were some low-income developing countries that couldn't service their debt, and then also to be able to meet up with the expenditure to contain the pandemic, they came out with this framework of call it DSSI, Debt Service Suspension Initiative. Ghana didn't take advantage. There were a few countries that took advantage. Ghana wasn't one of them. The reason Ghana didn't take advantage was that there was perceived cross-default. If Ghana had signed up for the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, which would have affected our credit rating and would have limited our ability to go to the international capital market and borrow. Remember, all that it takes a Minister of Finance in Ghana to do is to borrow either from the local market or from the international market, and then we throw Kenke party and Wati party, celebrate, thank God, and then we move on. Okay, so because of that, we didn't sign up for the debt suspension initiative. Okay, so, but the successor to that is what we call the G20 Common Framework, which we are now using to restructure mostly external debt, both external bilateral especially, and then the external commercial. The external bilateral has to be structured under the what we call the Official Creditor Committee, co-chaired by France and China. okay, because of our exposure to China. We did that. The total relief from the external bilateral debt restructuring came to about $2.8 billion. That's the total relief from the external bilateral out of a universe of $5.1 billion that had to be restructured. We got a relief of $2.8 billion. Majority of that is usually just moratorium, right, in terms of the debt perimeter. And all of this, we'll come back to the implication of that later and whether this is sustainable, right? So
yes.
That $2.8 billion relief Ghana received, that is cost, essentially, to our external bilateral creditors. Then you come to the external commercial, which we will call Eurobonds. Okay, it comes under the umbrella external commercial.
Okay.
So the external commercial, as of December 2022, our total exposure in the Eurobond market, external commercial, was around $14.6 billion. It went through some process of adjustment. So the universe of eligible bonds that were restructured under the external commercial came up to $13.1 billion. Out of this $13.1 billion, we received relief of, in present value terms, of about $4.7 billion. $4.4 billion. Okay, so this $4.4 billion out of the $13.1 billion it represents relief to Ghana government. That is cost to Eurobond holders. That's
the investor.
That is the haircut they have to go through in order for Ghana to have a briefing space. This is not a briefing space for long. It's a briefing space between 2023 effectively and 2026. So we'll come back to the table not too long from now, right? Bear that in mind. We'll discuss that later. So what have they done? If you look at what they have done, and it's quite painful, right? So if you look at the external commercial, actually, if Ghana had managed its affairs a little better, and even with the circumstances, there wasn't much solvency issue. Because if you look at the maturity clustering of our external commercial, really under normal circumstance, I mean, with little adjustment, it shouldn't have been a problem because we're going to have one repayment of $1.1 billion, of $1 billion, actually in 2026. Then another $2 billion in 2027, and then another $2 billion in 2029, and then 2030, we make another payment of $1 billion. Of course, like sovereigns, including Ghana, they typically don't pay down their debt. They roll it over. They take fresh debt to retire maturing debt. Now, that's what is done all over the place, of course. Now, with this one, what they have done is that they've restructured these bonds into two categories, essentially two categories.
We are talking about the Euro bonds, right?
The Euro bonds, yes, into two categories. The reason this has become topical now is because they had to now sign up onto the new bonds, right? They have to sign up. The process has been ongoing for some time now. So the two bonds that are available, let me put it that way, are what we call the disco option and then the par option. So look at how that is structured. So if you sign up, you get a signing up fee of 1%, okay, with the minimum threshold issue denominated of 1,000 USD. So you get 1% signing fee that's made available to you. But because government suspended coupon payment from December 2022, interest that should have been paid from January 2023 to, let's say, December 2023 were accrued and restructured into a separate instrument called past due interest bond. The past due interest bond suffered immediate haircuts of 37%, and the 63% remaining were structured into two different installments, one being paid in July 2024. Actually, that is past. Okay, but because the signing hasn't been done, this will be rollover to, I think, 1st January 2025.
So, Prof,
that will become due.
Prof, just for clarity again, you're saying that the interest that was supposed to be paid on the coupons from December where
December 2022, when we practically defaulted and suspended coupon because we couldn't pay.
Okay, so that one was put in another pot altogether, and it suffered a haircut.
Yeah, it suffered a haircut of 37%. And that particular pot or instrument is what we call the past due interest bond. So whatever coupon that was due you from that period has been restructured into a separate instrument called past due interest bond, and that suffered a haircut of 37%.
Of 37%. So if you, for instance, you were getting an interest of 10,000 cedis from December, and all the way to perhaps January it was not paid, and all the way to about maybe June it wasn't paid. Let's say that would be like 7 months. That interest of 70,000 cedis was pulled into a separate bracket, and that suffered a 37% cut.
Yes, and then the remaining government would now split the remaining into two, and you get the first installment actually July 2024. But because the signing and the documentation haven't been completed, this will be paid from January 2025.
Wow!
And then the other component, you will get that in January 2030 under the disco option. Now, so that is just the coupon that have been restructured. Then when it comes to the principal, the principal under the disco option also suffered 37% haircut. Okay, also suffered 37% haircut. The remaining were then structured into three different instruments. One called bond short, bond long, and down payment bond. Okay, that's how we structured. The mathematics are out there. Maybe time will not allow us to explain all of them. So under the disco, there are essentially four different instruments. Okay, let me put it that way.
So there's a bond short, there's a bond long, and then there's a bond down payment. That is after the 37% has been applied on the principal.
Yeah, the remaining will now be restructured into these instruments. Okay. And it will carry initial coupon of 5% that will graduate to 6% after 2026, and then the repayments are all in some maturing in 2036, 2030, and all of that. I mean, that's how it is. So you can imagine the new outlook in terms of your exposure. Actually, you think through this, it may give you a little headache. I mean, a good way to do this is to just as much as possible, guard your heart. Is that okay? Because the point is that this hard-earned money, foreign currency, people's savings, people's retirement, and all of that. But that's what happens if you have largely a government leadership that was partly irresponsible.
And speaking of the Eurobonds, for instance, Michael Blanson in his tweet says that they have been told that either you take a 37% cut and receive 5% interest with 11 years maturity date, or cut, or no cut, but 1.9% interest with 15 years maturity date.
They call that one the par bonds. Again, the par bonds, as the name suggests, does not suffer a haircut. But the coupon, the accrued coupon, just like in the case of the disco option, was also restructured into a separate bond instrument called past due interest bond. But that one suffers a haircut of 37%, just like under the disco we discussed earlier. And then the remaining split into two, like July 2024 and January 2020, similar to what happened under the disco option. But the interesting thing is that under the par option, because that would suggest in the immediate that there's no haircut, it's capped. It's capped at $1.6 billion. What that means is that even if all of them should apply for the par option, once it reaches that point, probably my limited understanding is that it will be some kind of two-way fee, right? And then once it reaches the 1.6 billion, the rest automatically will be given the disco. Will be given the disco. So even though this one doesn't suffer a haircut, the maturity arrangement is different to some extent from the disco, and then also the coupon payment. The coupon payment under the PAR is lower.
Okay.
It's lower. It's 1.5%, unlike the disco where initially it's 5%, and then from I think January or so 2026 it graduates to 6% to maturity. But the point is that we are hoping that when we restructure this and put the fiscal the space of the country into the right shape, the secondary market may reopen. If the secondary market reopens, in the secondary market, trading is done on price. Trading is done on price or pricing. So you may be able to sell. Is that okay? You don't need to hold on to it to maturity. You may be able to sell, maybe cut your losses and all of that. But we are hoping that if by 2027, as per the IMF program timeline, if we're able to go to the international capital market, then probably the secondary market activity will also pick up and people may trade. Okay. Not only that, the domestic market as well, the medium to the long term, and trading needs to intensify. And I think that will come when confidence restored and all of that. Probably after the election, a new government, their vision and all of that, whatever they put on the table will have a long way to go, or will have a lot of implications for confidence, and then for trading and also reopening the market. That's how we see it. But bear in mind, whilst we've gone through a very painful process, for Ghana to have a briefing space is for a very short time.
Okay.
If you look at the relief under the domestic debt exchange, I mean, the cluster around the IMF supported program. So in other words, and the IMF should offer explanation for this. The reason is that the relief that they have worked out under the debt sustainability analysis, right, it has been designed to give maximum relief while the IMF program is in place, so that the program can be effective. But after the program in 2026, the country is going to struggle. If we don't see that now and begin to prepare, you will see that right after the program, the country may have to call for another program or maybe extend even the existing one. Because if you look at the domestic debt exchange, the maturity clustering from 2027, 2028 going is huge. The country may not be able to absorb that. And then again, if you look at the external debt, the bulk of the relief has been structured to coincide with the timing of the IMF program. So right after the IMF program, the country will come crying. They're probably calling on investors to come to the table again.
But why would we settle for such a deal?
We didn't have an option. At the time we even made a call to the IMF, we didn't even have a program. This program we are implementing, the fund practically designed it and gave it to us. You think Ghana, we are managing anything? We are not. If you sleep and you think that we have leaders who are thinking about you, you are dreaming. Otherwise, we will not be facing existential threats with illegal, irresponsible mining. We will not be here.
Now, Prof, so at this point in time, you talk about from 2026, we are going to have tougher times. And do you see any deliberate conversation about, putting in place measures that will ensure that once this phase is over, we are able to cope better? I recall that the finance minister had said that they were setting aside a certain amount of money continuously to, cater.
Yeah. The next time you meet him, ask him how much have they put in that fund? And what is the projection from now to 2026, 2027, 2028? Oh, don't look too far. You see the way the political parties are making promises.
Yes.
You've seen that in the manifestos.
Yes.
And outside the manifestos, the promises and all of that. The question, where's the fiscal space to implement that? If you put all the promises they are making together, it's getting closer to almost all the promises in the Old Testament. But for God, He can make those promises because all His promises are yes and amen in Christ Jesus. But these politicians, where would they get the money to implement that? If you look at
be some form of reprieve for them, because as you were saying, government is relieved in terms of the fiscal space and they having to repay their debts and all that. But then again, the innocent Ghanaian who believed in the system and has always been told that government investments are the safest in terms of investments, believed this, never thought that they would get to this position where they would suffer this kind of issue. They have nothing, they have done no wrong, but then again, they are biting the bullet, and the government really isn't.
Yeah, you're right. But there's very little they can do now. The traditional view is that the financial market, the participants, the instruments, and all of that is typically the residual risk claimants of public debt overhang. That's a theoretical position. So when government is borrowing, is getting to the point where debt will become unsustainable, that residual risk is passed on to the financial market that holds government instruments. So, but that said, if you look at the conversation at the time we were talking about this domestic debt restructuring and all of that, there were strong oppositions to government including pensioners and also individual bondholders. If government was going to include individual bondholders, there should have been some kind of threshold above which your exposure will be included in the universe of eligible bonds. This idea of one size fits all and all of that, was problematic and is going to remain with us for so many years to come. But look at the interesting thing. Do you know something? Among the two main political parties, I've taken some time to analyze their manifestos. My conclusion is that a lot of the things the NPP claims they will do from 2025 are actually things that they created themselves.
As in problems they created themselves?
Yes, problems they created themselves. So they have spent like maybe 6 years to create problems that they're now asking for another 4 years to come and solve that problem. In fact, that's the conclusion you get by analyzing the NPP manifesto. Because if you look at the tax reliefs, hello?
Yes, Prof, I'm here.
If you look at the tax reliefs that the NPP has promised in their manifesto, abolishing e-levy. Who introduced e-levy?
They did.
They did. Treating separating the VAT, decoupling the VAT, the straight levies from the standard VAT rate. Who did it?
They did.
They did. Now they are saying that when they come, they will now come and merge it. Oh, so they need another 4 years to come and merge something they decoupled. Wow. They introduced e-levy. And then they said they need another 4 years to now come and abolish it. Oh, wow. Then who introduced COVID levy? They did. And now they want another mandate from us to come and remove it. My considered view is that, and really, if the NPP wants credibility, they only have the 2025 first quarter estimates as the public financial management stipulates to do something about these nuisance taxes before the election. Otherwise, there will be no credibility. In any case, the NDC has also promised to come and abolish them. Okay, so that's what you see. But this is where then again, when you look at the NDC manifesto as well, you will see that things that they actually created in the run up to 2016, where they moved the economy to taxation. Do you get a point? Look, Ghana, we are just moving in circles. The summary of the manifestos you see, as based on the analysis we have done, now both parties are actually saying that it is now time to move the economy from taxation to production. Remember, in the campaign, in the run-up to 2016 campaign, the NPP's campaign was that the economy was overtaxed.
Yes.
And therefore, they were going to move the economy from taxation to where?
Production.
To production. They spent the first 2 years doing something about it, and they brought us back to taxation. Now both parties are saying it's time to go back to production. Now, but this is the interesting thing. The NPP has another key promise to Ghanaians. What is that promise? And you don't find that strongly coming out in the NDC manifesto, but you find it strongly in the NPP manifesto. What is it? The NPP is saying that they will take care of the elderly. Did you see that?
The NDC or the NPP?
The NPP. The NPP said they will take care of the elderly. Oh, really? After you cause them to picket at the Ministry of Finance, you will now come and take care of them. So you see, you know, sometimes it looks as though we are not examining ourselves well.
And in fact, Prof, what you just said reminds me of what a lecturer of mine said, that in the country, what we do is that we create solutions to non-existent problems, thereby creating problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, I don't know whether the assumption is that we are incapable of tracking to see the inconsistency and all of that. So I think that we can engage further on all of this, but when you analyze all of that, look, what I can say, I may be wrong, and forgive me. What I can say is that most of the promises the political parties are making, they will struggle to fulfill them.
And they'll struggle to fulfill them because of the, is it because of the fiscal space they will be dealing with from 2025?
Yes. And the only way out, look, and you don't find that in the manifesto. Of course, I want to give some credit to the two main political parties because there's a certain effort towards cutting down government size. So I think the NDC is promising 60 ministers. NPP is promising 50. I want to believe that even though it's a reduction, and because they are comparing themselves to the poor record of the current president's size,
which
of
exceeded
government.
100.
Yes, it seems like they've done well. But 60 ministers, we can't bear it. We can't sustain it. 50 ministers, we can't. Go to Cote d'Ivoire here. Cote d'Ivoire is governing with 31 or 32 ministers. Have you seen the rate? Have you seen the Ivorian economy is growing?
Mm-hmm.
When there are inflation, the road infrastructure and the rest of them, the president of Cote d'Ivoire is in his third term office. And the country is not boiling. Can you imagine our current president suggesting that he wants to go for a third term? You will scream. It's not like Africans are not appreciative. When you put good leadership on the table, people appreciate it. Currently, we don't have it. So the only way out is for any political party that wins the election must adopt a lean government. And a lean government cannot be defined in terms of 60 ministers. It's too much. And look, we should be able to govern with less than 40. Because fiscal space will not be conferred on you. You have to create it. And first, you have to show leadership. Look, why do we go to church? We go to church because somebody says that when you die, I'll save you. And he led by example. Okay? He died himself and rose again. So, and you see this debt restructuring we are talking about, government didn't take any haircut. They still have their hairs on. They have their hair on. Okay? That's what you see happening.
And that's what hurts many of the investors, because they are bearing the brunt when those who actually cause the mess are not necessarily feeling the heat of it.
Importantly, when all that you see around that they place orders for the new Prado and V8 and the rest of them. Okay, so there's no austerity that they are internalizing themselves.
Now, Prof, finally, what does this do to the investment culture in the country? Because many people say that we followed the theory. They say government securities are the safest. We invested in those, and here we are having eggs in our faces. What does it do to the investment culture?
Yeah, look, when I put all these things together, I tend to lean towards the statement that Ghana needs a reset. Okay. And we have to start from 2025. We have to put credible leadership on the table. We have to have some kind of a long-term plan that we demonstrate to investors and Ghanaians, both here and outside, that we will follow through this and pay the price. as a way of restoring confidence in our financial markets, confidence in our economy, and all of that. Otherwise, it is very difficult to see a way out of this sustainably. Let me put it that way, right? So, because it's quite painful. I mean, look, Germany, to date, there are some citizens, people in Germany, who have not recovered from the inflation shocks of the 30s. That's how long some of these things could live with people. Do you know what some people probably might be doing right now in Ghana? They might be telling their children and children's children to be wary of Ghana government because of what the parents have gone through. It looks almost like something in the Bible where they say the fathers have eaten the grape and the children's teeth have been set on edge. Okay? I hope I got the quoting right. Forgive me. It's been a long time. I went back. Okay. So this thing is not something you can wish away in a month, in a year or so. If we are not careful, it may live with us for so many years. And some of these jargons that have entered our literature, our children will come and read about them because we are publishing about them. So they are actually being documented well and all of that. So I think we need some kind of a recalibration. Something that we need to do that would and it's not like it cannot be done, because you see, this is Cote d'Ivoire, this is Ivory Coast. 2010, 2011, they had issues, if you remember, and the rest of them. They told investors to exit and the rest of them. But I think something is happening in Cote d'Ivoire, for which reason even businesses in Ghana are relocating to Cote d'Ivoire and stuff like that. And then bear this in mind, if we are not careful, in the next 10 years, Ghana will begin to explore options of importing water from Cote d'Ivoire because of unsustainable,
illegal mining,
irresponsible mining. Okay, selfishness that forgets that it's actually digging a hole for itself. Okay, and one day we'll be calling on the IMF and the World Bank to come and help us reclaim the environment or something. Some of these damages they are irreplaceable. You can't. I mean, come on. I mean, do we really sit down and think where we are heading towards? We are heading dangerously.
Prof, thank you so much for speaking to us. We're grateful for your time, sir.
Thank you. My goal was not to spoil your breakfast. I hope you've taken your breakfast already.
I haven't, but yes, it sent me into deep thoughts. I think it started this weekend when I saw Ichikwam's interview. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. We're grateful for your time, sir.
God bless you.
All right, then. God bless you too. You had us speak to Professor Godfred Bokbin. He's an economist and professor of finance at the University of Ghana Business School. This is the Morning Star here on Star 103.5 FM.